Hey, and welcome to Pattern Niche on YouTube. This is a community-driven sewing channel where we share tips, tricks, and tutorials to help you on your craft journey. My name is Kate, and I am so glad you're joining us for today's video. We're going to be looking at the Maui top and how to sew that pesky binding. It is easier than you think. Before we get started, if you could take a couple seconds and hit that subscribe button, we would really appreciate it. It just means we're gonna show up in your YouTube account. And if you hit the little bell, you're also going to be notified when we put out new content. It's all totally free, but it really helps us out. So thank you. Now let's talk about the Maui. This is a close-fitting top. It is great for those hot summer days or as loungewear. In true pattern niche fashion, there are loads of options. You can make this as a standard tank top with wider straps and bands, and it has a racer back option, or as a cami with thin spaghetti strap binding. There's also options for a built-in shelf bra and a fun ruched bust detail. For this version, I am choosing the cami with the shelf bra built into it and no detail on my bust. The pieces I need for this top are the front and back shelf bra, the front and back binding pieces, the arm bindings, and then the front and back bodice pieces. Because the fronts and backs of this pattern are so similar, I like to use a blue clip, blue because back, blue, B. Can you tell I'm a homeschool mom? I like to use that just to kind of distinguish between the two. It's not foolproof, but it's what I do and it works almost all the time. You could also use a safety pin or some washi tape to keep things straight. And if you're making this shelf bra option, you're going to need some elastic. The pattern calls for 3/4 inch elastic, but I mean, if you have 1/2 inch on hand and that's all you have, I think it would work just fine. Alright, now if you're sewing the top without a shelf bra, you can actually go ahead and do the bindings first. So you would do the front binding, the back binding, and then the arm bindings all around, and then they would just cinch together at the side seam. The instructions do show how to do this. Personally, I prefer to do it at the end. I just like that it gives a nicer, cleaner finish in the arm section. That's just my preference though, and you'll have to decide for yourself what you want to do. I do think adding the front and back bindings ahead of time would be beneficial though. Now, if you are doing the shelf bra or if you want to have your binding encase everything at the end, you can go ahead and put your front and back pieces right sides together and sew up the side seams, and then repeat that with the shelf bra pieces. Next, take your elastic and sew it in a loop and then attach it to the bottom wrong side of your shelf bra in the loop. You will want to quarter this and then stretch in between to make sure everything lays nicely. The next step is to fold that elastic inside on itself and then top stitch it down. I'm actually choosing to wait until I switch threads over in my cover stitch machine, so you can do that and it can be one of the last steps, or you can go ahead and do it now. As it turned out, I could have done mine now anyway. Now we can go ahead and slip that shelf bra inside the main shirt. So you're going to want wrong sides together for this one because we want to see the pretty side of the fabric on the inside and on the outside. And then just line up the top of the edges all the way around and baste that all together. The key here is to make sure you are aligning everything as close to perfect as you can and not to stretch things out while you're basting or stay stitching. I also decided to add a tag in at this point as well. Really quick before we get into the binding, I did just want to mention, if you are enjoying this content, please give it a thumbs up. It truly does help YouTubers like us grow and evolve and continue to bring you more great content that you're craving. So thank you. Okay, once we have the bodice done, it's time to work on the binding. I like to pre-press my binding strips so that they're ready to go and sew for when I'm adding them on. This will become especially helpful when we go to do the straps. To do this, just fold each binding piece in half the long way, or hot dog bun style, and then press it. This will leave you a crease exactly down the center of that piece. Then you can take the two long edges and fold them in to the center to meet at that crease, or almost at that crease, and press again. Essentially, you're making double fold bias tape. You can then fold everything all over onto itself so the raw edges are encased and give it a good press again. Repeat this with all of the binding pieces. Okay, now we're going to take either the front or the back, whichever one you want to start with, it doesn't matter, and take your binding piece for that side. You're going to align the long edge of your binding piece with the top edge of your bodice, and the short ends of the binding will align with those points on the bodice. So start on one short end, and you're going to sew at a 3/8 inch seam allowance, which should be your crease on your bias tape, and you're going to sew all the way along, making sure to stretch your bias binding just a little bit to make sure it goes all the way to the end. Now take this binding and press it up and away from itself. Because you pre-pressed it and you have those creases, it will naturally want to do this. So you're going to press it up or bring it up, fold it over, and then tuck it back in on itself. Again, it should do this fairly easy for you. You really want to make sure that back or the inside is flat, smooth, not puckered up or anything like that. Again, this is easier if you pre-pressed. You also need to make sure that the front fold, what you folded over onto the front, is covering those first row of stitches that you did to secure the bias binding. Now you can clip this all in place and edge stitch it down. I'm using my cover stitch machine, but you definitely do not need a cover stitch machine to do this. You can use a twin needle or some sort of stretch stitch on your sewing machine, a zigzag stitch, a triple straight stitch, a lightning bolt stitch. Something like that will look just fine. Take your time, go slow, and just keep that folded edge lined up somewhere stationary on your presser foot so you can keep a nice even line. The armholes are attached in a similar way, but there's a couple things we need to add. So firstly, we need to take them and make a loop. So take each armhole and sew them right sides together along the short side to form a loop. You can do this on your serger. I'm using my regular sewing machine just with a regular straight stitch because I want to reduce some bulk, so I'm able to then press that seam open. You're going to notice on the pattern piece, the paper pattern piece, that there are notches on this specific piece. You need to make sure you're transferring those notches. They are very important to this next step. So we are going to line up that seam with our side seam, and we are going to do it the same way we did the front and the back. So the right side of the binding to the inside of the top. So if you're doing the shelf bra, again, you will see the printed side of the fabric. If you are not doing the shelf bra, then it would be the inside of the fabric or the back side of the fabric. So we are going to line this up, and I'm just going to put one clip in there so that I can show you the notches. So when we made our notches, you'll notice on our pattern piece that one notch is further away than the other one. So from the center, the one that's further away from center is the back, because if we take the front and back and line them up, you'll see that the back, right, this is my back, is longer than the front. So the front scoops lower than the back. Fairly normal. So that means we want the notch that is closer to the center to go to the front. And you're gonna have both on your piece. That's just how it is. So you'll see that the front one lines up at the top here, so that's no problem. I'm going to line that up at the edge of my binding for the front. See? Notch there and clip it. And you'll see that we will have to stretch the binding, just like we did on the front and back. Now the back one, we are going to notice that the notch closest to our top is closest to the center, which is for the front. We want to use this one. So kind of just eyeball it, or you could fold it over and make a parallel notch. But I'm just going to eyeball it. It's about, I don't know, a ½ inch from the front notch. And we're going to line that up there. And then that one will be stretched too. So now what I'm going to do is take this to my regular sewing machine and again stitch in that crease and basically baste it on just on the top. So we're not gonna do the whole thing, just where it attaches to the underarm of the shirt itself. So you're going to line that up and then sew in that first crease, again, starting at one edge of the binding and going all the way to the other edge of either the back or the front, whichever one you did not start on. So we are only attaching it to the top at this point, not going around the entire loop. Now we fold it all in just like we did for the front and the back. As we move along the edge and get to the strap portion that is not attached to the bodice, we just continue the same thing. So fold it in, line up those two folded edges as perfectly as you can, give them a good clip, and then it's time to top stitch. So now you're going to edge stitch along the entire loop. Again, when you get to that arm piece, it can be kind of nerve-wracking. Just go slow and do your best. Now all that's left to do is hem it and you're done. This is such a great casual pattern and a super quick sew. With all the variations, you'll be able to make a drawer full of Maui tanks in no time. Thanks so much for watching, liking, and subscribing. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them down below so we can get back to you. Have a great day. Bye.